Hey folks, welcome. You're listening to the Field and Garden Podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Mason Ziegler, flower farmer, author, teacher, and entrepreneur coming to you from southeastern Virginia. Now, this podcast is where I can connect with you talking cut flower gardening, cut flower farming, cut flower business, and even cut flower garden dogs, y'all. You're going to hear stories, firsthand experiences, including my blunders and just about everything in between when it comes to growing cut flowers. Now, the Field and Garden Podcast is made possible by thegardenersworkshop.com, where our mission is to make it possible for flower lovers at all levels to grow and enjoy flowers for pleasure, and yes, my friends, even for profit. So we haven't talked in a while about the bones of a cutting garden. And I believe that once you understand the simplicity and the joy, will make a backyard cutting garden more than possible for you. Now, did you know that smaller is better? And this applies to all cutting gardens for both home gardeners and even for flower farmers, y'all. And it just makes this type of garden a perfect fit for any backyard. Now, once you understand a little bit about the way a cutting garden works, it becomes really obvious why the smaller is better. You know, I have so frequently seen folks plant a big garden or redo the landscape on their home to only watch it grow into a literal blooming mess. I mean, it's a lot of maintenance to keep up with. And it's kind of like your eyes are bigger than your stomach when you're filling your plate. There's no other situation that I believe that this is truer with, right? So pretty quickly, weeds just move in, and trust me, you don't know, or if you don't have time to prevent the weeds from getting out of control, you really won't have the even more time required to get rid of them. So when you pop on top of all that mess of a big garden, that the literal lifeline of a cutting garden is to cut and harvest it clean of flowers at least once, but preferably twice a week. It's easy to see why most people never make it to the finish line to enjoy the absolute joy of a cutting garden, right? First off, you set yourself up to fail by going big. Then you don't prevent the weeds. Then you get caught up in trying to eliminate the weeds. And you just never make it to the end of that road where you actually get to live the joy of a cutting garden. And I'm going to give you the down and dirty on a cutting garden. And, you know, friends, I'm just going to tell it like it is. Do not screw this up, people, and go off script if you're still in the stage of where you have your training wheels on, right? This means do as the tens of thousands of people before you have done and discovered the absolute joy that will light you on fire for growing more, or whatever that might be for you. You know, some of us want to grow bigger garden. Others want to just live life enjoying this small little garden. And some people even go on to become professional cut flower growers, maybe. But the point now, at this time, at this point in life, is stay on script for at least one season, with 2 seasons as a really solid start to what all the possibilities could be with a little cutting garden. So what is the script, right? So I am going to pop through these. Then afterwards, I'm going to give you some places where you can go to learn more detail, because we can't do all the heavy lifting in here, right? So what is the script? The number one, and I'm telling you, I can remember when I would be speaking at conferences or to groups about this very subject. And I could see the wheels turning in people's heads as I was saying what I'm about to say to you. And I could see them thinking, when I say start smaller than you think. And home gardeners, I'm talking like a 3 by 10 foot garden, or even smaller, a 3 by 5. I mean, we're talking the size of a picnic table, right? And particularly when I would be speaking to master gardener groups, I could see, because I've already shown them, beautiful imagery, right, of all the beautiful flowers you can grow and the little bouquets you can make from them and have on your kitchen table and share with your friends. And, so I've already romanced them, right? We're past the first date, right? And they're thinking 3 by 10, geez, I'm going to plant 3 times more than that because I want to have more flowers. Friends, I am telling you, that is where people start going off the script because they think they need more flowers. But I'm telling you, go one season on script and you will find out why smaller is better. Because this little garden, when you follow the basic script that I recommend, you are going to have so many flowers from that little patch that you don't need a bigger garden. That's part of the joy, y'all. It doesn't take a big garden that you're a slave to, right? So we're talking 3 by 10 or even smaller. And then you're going to treat it like a cutting garden. And you are just going to be one of the people I talk about later in this podcast that write me notes, right? So that's number 1. Start small. Stick to the script. Number 2, drop this garden where it will thrive. And where is that? In 8 hours or more of bright sunlight a day. I totally feel your pain if you're fighting a shady situation, but you have to find a solution to this because you will never be able to really fully embrace a cutting garden until you have some sunshine, because the flowers that make the best cuts typically are full sun plants, and for them to thrive and reproduce, they have got to get that amount of sunlight. I literally have spoken to people that are gardening in their neighbor's yard, or there's options, friends. First off, I'm a tree lover. We're big. I have an arborist that comes to my farm every year to take care of our trees. Most trees are planted too close together. And sometimes eliminating trees is a really healthy thing for you to do for your other trees. And it opens up bright spots in your yard, or potentially lemon trees up. Trees should really be pruned on a regular basis to keep them healthy and long-lived. And we call it editing. Editing means removing trees. Trees are not meant to last forever. So I'm just saying, you got to find some sunshine if you're going to actually do this cutting garden, right? So that's number 2, that 8 hours or more of bright sunshine a day is the best case scenario. And then number 3, y'all, is all of these pieces are key, but this one has more impact than people ever imagine. And that is to spend more time preparing the garden bed soil than you want to. This is huge, y'all. I can remember one of the books that I read by Elliot Coleman that really taught me how a farm works, the whole system, and, how you build the soil and how that just reflects on everything you do. And I learned so much from that book. But I think it's the first chapter of that book, he quoted Thomas Jefferson, which I can't quote. I'm like paraphrasing here, y'all, because I couldn't find the quote, and you'll get the gist. that based on the performance of plants is basically a direct reflection of what your roots are growing in. And so Thomas Jefferson was quoted as he was replying in a letter to his daughter Anne, who apparently had been belly aching about how her garden just wasn't growing very well, right? And he wrote back to her and said in such a daddy way, saying, I suspect that the puny performance of your garden is a direct reflection of the soil that your plants are growing in. And that is it in a nutshell, friends. If you have struggling, puny plants, I can almost promise you, you are standing on the problem. And so preparing the soil is, so it's almost like I frequently have used the example of, have you ever painted the walls of a room, and you're so excited to get the paint, new color on the wall, that you really don't pay much attention to fixing the blemishes that are on the wall, whether that's holes from photos that have been hung on the wall, or there's cracks or chips or something like that. And you really don't notice them until you put the paint on the wall. And then those imperfections shine like a flashlight in your eye. That is the same way it is with soil. You don't really realize just how significant it is until you don't do it, and your plants are literally struggling. You know, the way you prepare your soil controls everything. I mean, you're building the biology that not only delivers all the nutrition to your soil, but how it holds moisture, everything. It is key, y'all. Number 3 is key. Then number 4, after you prepare thoroughly, more than you think you should, after you're done, then to finish it off, to prevent those annual weed seeds from sprouting, you have to take the next step that will make or break your season. It's going to either make you a slave, which then, that won't last long. 2 weeks of being a slave to your garden, and you say, forget this, I'll just buy flowers. Do you know what I mean? Literally, that is so true. Or you can focus on the flowers by setting this bed up to be as low a maintenance as possible. And that allows you to focus on what you're planting, what you're growing, and taking care of it, and not on all the weeds. Now, just a little side note, I live in the South, so we have vicious weed pressure. Weeds come in 2 different ways, y'all, if you aren't familiar with this. There are annual weeds that come from seeds, just like the flowers that we're talking about, where you start a seed, it sprouts and grows. That's a whole bunch of weeds that I have in my gardens. But then there's also perennial weeds, things that just grow back from the roots that are deep down. And that's Bermuda grass and all those creeping grasses. And there's a whole bunch of different ones. And you have to figure out what you have and the best way to extinguish them before you start. And then to prevent, mainly for me, our big struggle is to prevent weed seeds that grow from seed, not from roots, from getting the light that they need to sprout and grow. And by doing what I'm talking about now, immediately following preparing your bed, you are going to mulch to prevent that process from ever starting. And it is just really, really huge. So this means that following the timeline of preparing the soil and then mulching immediately to not give those weed seeds a chance to start is 95% of the battle won before it's even started, y'all. Timing, I could do probably 10 podcasts on timing. I was so screwed up on my time in the first 10 years that I was creating all the work that I was having to slay. And now we just prevent all that mess from even happening. So that's why I'm saying stick to the script, y'all, at least until you figure out what you're doing and what you want to do. All right, so that was number 4. After you prepare, finish the bed off properly and on time so that you can focus on the flowers and not be fighting weeds. Number 5, plant cut flower variety plants. You know, it's so misleading, right? Because they make bedding plants that look identical to the same flower that grows on a cutting variety, like zinnias. I just actually was at Home Depot it was Home Depot with my sister, and we went to the plant department, of course. And there was ageratum and celosias and marigolds in there that looked just like the same flowers that we grow in our cutting garden. But guess what, friends? They only grow 4 to 10 inches tall. This is what I'm talking about. You have to pay attention. You have to grow cut flower varieties. That means that they grow tall enough to be cut. They have a long vase life. They typically don't drop pollen on your tabletops, and they're prolific producers, meaning the more you cut, the more they come. And just beware that these are not normally available down at nurseries. Those cutting garden flowers are too tall. People don't want that in their landscape. They fall over. And I'm going to show you in a minute how to prevent that. But just be aware. You have to start from seed, and it can be so easy, y'all. Again, just like I'm talking you through this cutting garden thing, seed starting is very much the same way. People come at it based on nothing, no information from somebody that actually does it. And it can be super simple, right? So start from seed, and it can be easy because you're not going to find cut flower varieties down at the local nursery or big box store. Those are for landscapes, which is what their customer is looking for, right? All right, that was number 5, plant the right flowers. Number 6, plan for and use flower support netting. This is the one that so many people, you only skip this once, because there is nothing more heartbreaking than investing your heart and time and money into growing these beautiful flowers, and then to come out and discover that after a 10-minute downpour of rain, they're all now laying down in the mud, on your lawn. And friends, let me just tell you, there is no coming back from that. Yes, you can sometimes cut and rescue the ones that are down, but your plants just never, and that also can uproot your plants depending on what we're talking about. But there is no real coming back from that. Usually you just have to cut, harvest the entire garden, refirm the plants back up, and then you have to wait for more plant flowers to grow. There's just nothing more heartbreaking, y'all. And flower support netting prevents this when it is installed properly. Keyword, y'all, proper. And it's easy to use, and it does an excellent job. It's what keeps flower farmers in business, y'all. That's why we have tall, straight flowers to cut when we go out to our garden, because we use flower support netting. And when it's installed properly, it's super easy to cut through. So don't be using that excuse. Number 7 is the golden rule. What is the golden rule? Friends, you must cut the flowers hard and often. And that means that I recommend harvesting and cutting your garden twice a week for the most pristine blooms and the most volume from your garden. That doesn't sound like it makes sense, right? More volume from more cutting. The more you cut, the recommended varieties that I recommend that are cutting garden varieties, they grow more and more. They branch more and more, right? The flowers are harvested at varying stages of opening, meaning a zinnia, for instance, needs to be fully open before you actually cut it, because it is not going to open anymore after you cut it. Versus other side of the table, sunflowers. You cut them almost completely closed to prevent beetles and pests damaging the petals, and they quickly open fully indoors away from where the pests are. You have to know for every flower that you're actually growing what stage of opening you need to cut it at. Because that means when you cut it at the right stage can mean the difference of that flower lasting 10 days or 3 days when you do it wrong. So it's a key piece. And friends, I just want to say the other part of cutting the garden that I should have mentioned this up of where you actually put this garden in addition to 8 hours of sun. I also recommend that you put the garden out of sight from inside your home anywhere. Like, for instance, if I could see this garden sitting in my favorite chair in my family room, looking out, I would never cut it because I'm enjoying it from indoors. Typically, we end up putting cutting gardens out of sight, not because they're ugly, but it's because if you can't see it, the only way you're going to be able to enjoy it is to cut the flowers, because that really is one of the hardest parts for a lot of people. It's not hard for me now. I mean, I'm the opposite. I can't believe you leave them out there in the hot sun and blowing winds with bugs crawling all over them, doing you know what on them, right? So that is the script, friends. This little cutting garden can become a small and mighty part of your life. And, that's no joke. The notes and cards I've received from those that have gone before you for the past 30 years, literally, I started teaching, I guess, 5 years in. Notes from people who have never experienced a cutting garden. They are overwhelmed with the absolute simplicity and the joy that comes from that little piece of backyard that you have never put into action like this before. And that's the honest to goodness truth, y'all. Now, if you want to learn how to do it, you're not sure where to start, I'm going to go on right now and I'm going to review and give you the guide to basically my resources. And you can learn in a number of different ways for whatever fits your learning style. So let's go through them. And you can see if there's one of these that hits you that you want to actually embark on growing a little cutting garden. So number one is for the meat and potatoes of a 3x10 warm season cutting garden. That includes how to prepare, what to plant, setting up for low maintenance, and cutting garden care. There is the Easy Cut Flower Garden course, as well as the digital book download. It is quick. It's down and dirty, y'all. It is a quick and easy to get started now kind of deal. I mean, you can sit down and watch it, print out the digital book if you want to, and have the guide on exactly what to do. So this course and digital book will guide you to create that little home cutting garden that'll produce a big handful of flowers each week. And I promise you're going to have some to share with your friends. I have also, which is a great companion to this little garden, is I have curated a seed collection. It's called the Cut Flower Seed Collection that has the very flower seeds for the suggested garden. And it's super easy. Those resources include a little map, a little guide on what to plant, but so does the seed collection. So that is, if you want to, by golly, I'm going out right now and planting a garden. That's the resource that'll actually do that for you. Now, number two is, if you're a veggie gardener and you're interested in dropping a little cutting garden in your vegetable garden for not only your cutting pleasure, but to benefit your vegetable garden by all the great company that flowers keep, my book, Vegetables Love Flowers, is perfect for you. It includes all the steps, plus, in addition to, what little garden to set up in your vegetable patch, what to grow, how to care for a cutting garden. It's all in there. It also includes my philosophy on gardening and farming, y'all. And that means doing it without using pesticides. And this book really became wildly popular after I was a guest on my good friend Joe Lample's podcast, Joe Gardner. And Joe shared, the impact that growing flowers and bringing flowers into his big vegetable garden, the one that you see on his TV show, Growing a Greener World, and in his books, and just the impact that flowers had on a vegetable garden. And I just loved hearing from Joe, and just sent me over the moon. So the book, Vegetables Love Flowers, can really take you from the no way, there's no room for flowers in my veggie garden to, oh my gosh, why have I not grown a little patch of flowers in the middle of my vegetable patch kind of thing. So that's number 2. So number 3 is, if you're the person that is pumped to grow a cutting garden because you're a gardener and you've cut from your garden, but you've never grown a deliberate cutting garden, but you're on the scene, you know what it's all about. If you want the hows and whys of a cutting garden, the steps in more details, to be introduced to more cutting garden flowers, then my book, The Cut Flower Handbook, is the one for you. Because this book shows and shares in my cut to the chase kind of way, y'all, right? Not only the simple blueprint of a successful cutting garden, but it guides you to learn when to plant warm season and cool season annuals for your garden. It guides you through figuring that out. And you learn through instructions and great illustrations how to truly grow a 3-season cutting garden, whether for pleasure or profit, y'all. There are actually sprinkled throughout this book tips for home gardeners and tips for flower farmers, because the basic growing information is all the same. Recommended varieties. It shows you images in this book on the stage to cut. It tells you when to cut it, where to cut it. So the Cut Flower Handbook is really for that person that is an enthusiast that is just launching, and it's for the seasoned flower farmer to introduce perhaps more flowers to your garden. But most importantly to me, the Cut Flower Handbook really ushers in the possibilities of growing a 3-season cutting garden. So that's there for you. And then number 4, now, after you've experienced maybe like you've been cutting from your warm season cutting garden and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I don't want this to stop. I want it to start again as soon as possible. And so when you're ready to explore a cool season cutting garden, a cool season hardy annual cutting garden that starts blooming the earliest in spring, right into summer. It includes flowers. Friends, we're talking about sweet peas and poppies and snapdragons and bells of Ireland and even lysianthus and others. All those flowers that if you're a Southerner like me, people told us we can't grow. Y'all, I've been growing them like weeds for over 2 decades now. And the start to all of that is in my book, Cool Flowers. It is really the jumping off point for this other family of flowers. It explains the concept of how many of us can plant these plants in the fall and or very early spring. And it's like most people that aren't familiar with this didn't catch that. I said very early spring. You know when that is? That's 6 to 8 weeks before your last frost date. That means you're planting when it is still cold outside. And that is the secret, friends. This concept will have the best garden you have ever experienced in spring right into summer. And so when you're ready, so let's just say this. Once you succeed with a cool flower garden, you are going to be so on fire. When that time comes, when you're ready to go deep on this fabulous family of cool season hardy annuals and you want to grow more and learn more, the course Cool Flowers from Seed to Harvest, which I co-author with Lane of Seed Talk, my co-host over there. This fabulous course is packed with video demonstrations in the field. It just goes over all the how-tos. I think it's 35 different cool flowers, troubleshooting, and more. So friends, we have you covered. You have all the resources once you decide you want to grow a cutting garden. So friends, I hope that this podcast has excited you and is going to guide you. And I just can't wait to get a note from you talking about the joys of a cutting garden that you never knew about before, right? So if you're enjoying Field and Garden, I would have so appreciated if you would drop a review on the podcast app you are listening to this on. You can't imagine how much this helps us to reach more listeners. The way it works, the more reviews you get, the more the podcast app shows our podcast to potential listeners. So you help us so much. And remember to subscribe so you won't miss an episode, and drop in anytime. Friends, you're always invited. The door is always open at thegardenersworkshop.com for all home gardeners and flower farmers, because we have so many resources over there, videos, blogs, fully stocked online garden shop, the library of our online courses, both for gardeners and flower farmers. And friends, don't forget to check out our weekly live gardening shows that stream from our phone app, and you can watch the replays on our app. Friends, all we do is for you, and we appreciate you so much. Till we meet again, friends. Ciao.